Alright guys, a while ago I told you I would do a little bit of an overview on Airsoft and kind of talk about some of the equipment, what I use for training, and why. Two of the main brands that I use are the WE and the KWA. Um, this is a WE ISSC. It's known as the M22. It's basically a Glock 19. What happened was Glock sued the airsoft industry. They've got copyrights on their stuff, so basically the only place you can get a true Glock airsoft version is if you order it from overseas, and that's if it makes it through customs. But this is an exact replica of a G19. The only difference is that it has an external safety here, which we have actually just ground off on this side. So for all intents and purposes, this is the one that you see me using in all the videos for training. It is exact in every way. So you guys have seen it function before. Actually strips down the same way. Pull the takedown levers. Slide comes forward. And there's no guide rod assembly. It's just a spring and then sort of a receiver button that takes the place of the guide rod. Other than that, the barrel assembly comes out the same way. The only difference is that the main barrel and the inner barrel actually are in two separate pieces. This is the part that actually matters as far as shooting. This is basically just for decoration. Now, one of the things that I've done here is I've shown you kind of one of the problems. If you look right here, this little piece, you'll see it's missing this piece. This goes right in here, and basically you'll see on this one it has that little tab right there, and on this one it's missing. This happens sometimes when I'm doing striking with the pistol, because that barrel assembly, that outer barrel assembly, is just cast aluminum. Sometimes what will happen is it usually takes a pretty good amount of force, and it usually takes a number of times of doing it, but it sometimes does break off that little ear. And what you end up doing is you end up just buying a new outer barrel, dropping that in the same way. So I take the inner barrel, drop it in the outer barrel, drop everything in the slide the same way that you would a normal Glock. Put that button assembly in right there. Spring goes in just the same way you would in a Glock, just minus the guide rod. And then reattach the slide. Functions the same way. Okay. This part right here costs anywhere between like $7 and $10. It's not that much, but this is a piece that has a tendency to break. This is a KWA 1911. Now, KWA makes their stuff a whole lot more robust than we. The problem is that KWA doesn't make anything along the lines of a Glock 19. They've got certain pistols, but they're not Glock clones, and that's a problem because a lot of the places we go, we end up using Glocks. So I want to be able to train with a Glock. But this is the 1911 in particular. They have a line of pistols called the Professional Training Pistol. It's known as a PTP, and they also have a PTR, which is Professional Training Rifle. These things are identical in almost every way, up to and including weight. All of these are metal, and they're good quality. They function as far as operation goes in every way, like a real firearm. But the KWAs are a whole lot more robust. They are solid, good pistols and rifles both. The problem with the KWAs in both the pistol and the rifle are these little valves. These are the fill valves which go in the magazine right down here. And this is where you fill it up. Now you can either fill it up with propane or you can fill it up with green gas. I use propane. I'll show you that in a minute. But when you fill these up, the KWAs have a tendency to leak, and you have to keep replacing these valves. It's not that much because the valves you can replace, and they're like $4 or something like that. Usually I'll buy like 10 or 12 of them at a time and just keep them here. Whenever they start leaking, I'll replace them. But it's a pain in the butt. The Wii's have a much better valve system and much better seals. These things, I don't think I've ever really had one leak. These things run forever. But the pistols are not as durable. Now, that being said, I'm by no means saying that they are not durable. You guys have seen me do all the training that we do with the Wii, and they're perfectly good for me to train with. But I just, in the essence of being fair, if they had a KWA version of the M22 or the Glock 19, I would be using that as opposed to the Wii version, as far as their durability goes. So, have another M22 here. This one is just set up with the TLR1 light from Streamlight. This right here is a Wii M4. This is known as their open bolt, and you can see from the bolt assembly it functions in every way just like a real M4. Locks back, slide release, or bolt release rather, functions in every way. Light operates. I'm a big advocate of on your rifle platform that everything is set up ambidextrous, so that regardless of which shoulder that I'm firing from, the controls are in the same place. My holds, my body position, all of that, all that kinesthetic alignment is all the same. So, but this is a platform that is set up basically just like some of our other rifles that allow us to train and get proficient at operating those controls just like you would in a real scenario. The difference is this one here utilizes a CO2 magazine. Now, I said that this was a Wii platform. KWA does make a platform that is a little bit more robust. This runs about $280 for just the plain M4, and then you set it up however you're going to set it up. Basically, the point being is you want to be able to match whatever your actual home defense rifle is or whatever, so that it has some good training benefits for you. But even just from the aspect of weapons manipulation, ejecting mags, loading mags, clearing malfunctions, things like that, those are all things that you can practice with this as well, regardless of whether or not it's set up, because the controls are in the same location regardless. So there is some benefits there, but obviously if you have the ability, you want to set it up just like your normal home defense rifle. So some of these run on CO2 mags, some of them, and this is the CO2 canister right here, some of them run on green gas. I mentioned that I use propane. The reason that I use propane is because green gas is the same exact thing as propane. It is propane. The only difference is that it doesn't have the smell added to it, which the federal government requires that the smell be added to propane. It doesn't have the smell added to it in green gas, and it also has the addition of a silicone lubricant added to it as well, so that basically as you're charging your magazines, a small amount of silicone lubricant gets in there and helps lubricate the seals that are in the magazines. Now, the difference is that a paint can size, don't have one here, but a paint can size of green gas runs about $13. versus this runs $2.50, and there's probably 2 to 3 times as much gas in here as there is in a green gas container. The only difference is that you buy this adapter piece, which you can get at most airsoft places. You can get them online. This will run you about 11, 15 bucks, something like that. I think I paid 11 bucks for this. And what that does is it converts a normal Coleman propane canister into a fill station so that you can fill these magazines up. And essentially what you do is you just take this, you'll press it into the valve, line it up, and then it's full. And then there's a release valve here to let the gas out. And really the only downside is that there's a certain amount of smell to it. One of the other things that this one has is it's got a small little nozzle here that you can drop silicone lubricant into it if you want. I usually don't do it that way. What I usually do is take just a drop of silicone lubricant and I drop it on the nozzle, and then I go ahead and I fill it with the propane canister, and that helps push it helps lubricate both the seal in the bottom as well as the seal throughout. And that's worked fine for me. I haven't ever had any issues there. One of the other things is when you do this, when you do lubricate it, you want to use silicone oil, not off the shelf some sort of silicone spray or anything like that. You want to use silicone oil that is actually made for this. The reason for that is because you cannot use any petroleum products on these. These seals, because they're not made for heat, and petroleum products, that's what they're intended for. Even gun oil is intended to combat heat. If you use any kind of gun oil on this, it'll eat through the seals, and then your gun is just going to leak. It's not going to work for you. So you want to make sure that you use a silicone lubricant. I recommend propane. You can get the CO2 if you want. These do kind of hit a little bit harder as far as things like recoil, but it's not going to be anywhere along the lines of true recoil. But this does give it a little bit more snap and a little bit higher FPS if that's an issue for you. But it's up to you. I've got both set up because I just wanted to try them out, but the green gas, or the propane rather, seems to work fine for me. So that's pretty much that. I meant to have a KWA rifle here for you. I didn't have one, but they're built the same way as far as the quality of those, the pistols, and they've got the same drawbacks. The KWA rifles run about $100 more than the Wii, but they are more robust. They're a whole lot more solid. The downside to them is that they're more temperamental. Things like the valves and things like that, all of their parts are proprietary, so you can only get it from KWA, so you'll have to order extra valves and things like that, for just general maintenance type stuff. You have to maintain these just like you do a pistol, so every time you use a pistol, you take it apart, you clean it. You should do the same with this. Take it apart, clean it. I don't do it every time, but I do kind of go through it and maintain it. And that way I can just kind of look at things and make sure that there's no issues. And then basically you can use the same silicone lubricant just like you would a normal gun oil in oiling your gun. You can go ahead and oil all that up. So that's pretty much it on the Airsoft. I don't know if that answers any of your questions. One of the other things, if you're going to be shooting at your house, I would highly recommend you get these biodegradable. Not because I really care about the environment, but because these things basically when they get wet, they begin to start breaking down, so you don't end up with 10,000 BBs all over your yard and your driveway and things like this, or your garage. These things will break down. You can take and sweep them out in the yard or blow them or whatever, and then a couple days a week or whatever, they'll break down and you don't have an issue. The weights on these, you do not want to use some Walmart brand Airsoft BBs. The reason is because these shoot at a much higher FPS than the piece of crap guns that you would get at Walmart. And I've literally seen some of the Walmart BBs when they're put inside good quality training platforms. I've seen them actually shatter, and then you got to go in there and dig all the pieces out. All of these are gas operated. They do make electrics. Mostly the electrics are in the pistols, or excuse me, in the rifles, but the electrics I have found they're not worth it. They're very temperamental. They're fine for playing, if that's what you're into, you want to use them for playing, but they're nowhere near the strength and the durability of what is known as a gas blowback, which is what these are. So as far as doing things like striking and fighting with a weapon, doing disarms and things like that, with some of the electric guns, you're probably going to break something. Versus with these full metal gas blowbacks, you're going to be able to actually be able to go full contact if you want. In fact, with the KWA models, the pistols, I would have absolutely no problem going 100% full contact, smacking somebody with this thing, and I have no doubt that this thing would hold up. The Wii's, we do, but I probably go 80% when I'm going full contact. Like if I'm striking somebody in the face with this thing, I may not hit to the same degree, or if I do, sometimes what happens is you end up with this type of situation, which I mentioned earlier, and you just end up having to replace those. So again, the parts on these are not expensive. They're a few bucks here and there in order to maintain, and if you're going to get airsoft for training, particularly for force on force, where you're going to be striking and hitting each other and doing disarms, you will be replacing parts. Don't go into this in any way thinking that I'm just going to buy a gun and then that's the last thing I'll ever have to do. You will end up replacing parts. But the nice thing is that if you have a Glock and then you buy the airsoft version, it strips apart the same exact way. You should be able to change these things out with minimal problem whatsoever. So anyway, you guys go ahead and answer or respond with comments. Let me know if you have any questions specifically, and I'll try and get to those. But other than that, you guys train hard.